So, Democratic former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel calling out his party as he appears to be considering a 2028 presidential run. The Wall Street Journal saying, quote, he calls the party brand toxic and weak and woke. A nod to culture war issues he thinks Democrats have become too often fixated on that President Trump has successfully used against them. Democratic California Congressman Ro Khanna joins us now. So, Congressman, thanks so much for joining the program. One thing I always appreciate about you is you're willing to talk to the other side. But is Rahm Emanuel right here? Has your party become too woke, too non-masculine, and not talking with people about the things that matter?
No, he's dead wrong. Look, this is the party of FDR. We did originally make in America. We industrialized the entire country. It's the party that has guaranteed Americans Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid. I'm calling for a new economic patriotism so we become a manufacturing superpower, so we have high-paying jobs and build wealth in every community and have a Marshall Plan for America. The history of the Democratic Party, it's a great party.
Yeah, but the problem is, Congressman, before you can get on this, and some voters may like that, but they don't hear any of that because they feel lectured by the party. All these pronouns, no one cares about that.
Well, look, I'm totally opposed to canceling people for saying the wrong word or telling a joke. I've been one of the biggest defenders of free speech. But when you go to places like Lorain, Ohio, or Johnstown, Pennsylvania, what they're talking about is how are we going to get good-paying jobs? How are we going to get a new factory? How are we going to get our kids new economic opportunity? And the Democrats have a plan. What it will take is investment there. What it is going to take is helping finance new factories, buying things from people who make things in America. There's a group in the House, they're called Economic Patriots. It's with Chris Deluzio in Western Pennsylvania. That's what most Democrats are talking about. And I believe that a new economic patriotism can win back people across this country.
Yeah, but Congressman, no one's listening to that. You guys in the Democrat House have the lowest approval rating ever. So I hear these plans and proposals. You guys are always great about that, releasing documents, doing analysis and all that. But no one's listening to you.
Well, look, we may not be making headway in the mainstream beltway, but what I believe is we got to get out into the community. I spend more of my time in places like Johnstown, Milwaukee, places that have been deindustrialized. And here's the reality. Just having blanket tariffs aren't going to bring back the factories. We know what will. We got to make investments there. We've got to invest in the workforce. We've got to create apprenticeships. We've got to help people who don't have a college degree. And we can deliver. We did with the semiconductor industry.
Okay, so one of the ways that you guys also have to move forward is dealing with the past as well. And a lot of people are calling it a cover-up. This is what Jake Tapper had to say about what took place with Joe Biden and the people that knew about it. Let's watch it.
It is an entirely separate scandal. It is a scandal.
Yes.
It is without question, and maybe even worse than Watergate in some ways.
Right.
Because Richard Nixon was in control of his faculties when he wasn't drinking.
So, Congressman, it was cheap fakes. You even said after the Her report on Fox that Joe Biden was completely mentally sharp. Do you have any regrets?
Well, I do have regrets for backing him for a second term. That was a mistake. I've said that the Democrats should own up to that. We should have pushed back against a lot of what we were hearing from the White House. I met him a few times. In those instances, he was fine. But the reality is he shouldn't have run. And I think the Democrats would be better just owning up and saying that was a mistake. The American people are fair, but we do have to take accountability.
Yeah, but Congressman, I think it's more than a mistake. A mistake is when I forget to put my right signal or my left signal on. The book outlines that it was intentional, and as long as he was breathing, that aides and members of Congress, the Democrat establishment just wanted to keep him alive so they could get the agenda. So is this a massive cover-up?
Well, certainly not that I know of. I mean, I met him a few times in the year. He was perfectly fine. But I do think what the mistake was that we should have pushed back more against the old guard and insisted on new voices. And now you're seeing that in the Democratic Party. You're seeing a lot of new voices there. You're seeing a demand for the old guard to step aside. And you're seeing a focus on the economy, of a real vision of how we're going to raise wages, get new jobs. You know, I represent a district of $14 trillion in Silicon Valley. I want to see wealth generation in the modern economy across this country. And that's really the focus, and that's going to be a new generation.
All right, Congressman, we appreciate you coming on this morning.
Thank you.
While AOC and Bernie Sanders have been going around the country with their Fight Oligarchy tour, Democrats are reconsidering their use of left-wing buzzwords and elite-sounding phrases like fight oligarchy. D.W. Origi is the former national press secretary for the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Megan Hayes, former director of message planning for the Biden White House. So words are important. No question about it. Here's what the Washington Post said. Democratic troubles revive debate over left-wing buzzwords. From intersectionality to equity, many say jargon is alienating key voters. But progressives say inclusive language is vital. Here's what the Kentucky governor, Democrat Andy Beshear, said about it all. I believe that over time, and probably for well-meaning reasons, Democrats have begun to speak like professors. It makes Democrats or candidates using this speech sound like they're not normal. It sounds simple, but what the Democratic Party needs to do is be normal and sound normal. And I'm hearing Megan saying hallelujah to that. Let's just be normal.
Yes, absolutely. I think that somewhere along the line, we forgot to talk to real people. We wanted to sound smart amongst ourselves, so we started saying big buzzwords, and people were worried about being canceled, so they wanted to be extremely inclusive. But that's not actually working. People don't want to hear it that way. People want you to go talk to them like they're a normal person, because you are a normal person. We're all having the same issues. I worry about how I'm going to pay for my groceries and my gas, just like everybody in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania in the battleground states. So Democrats need to focus on just getting back to normal and start talking to the people that we make policies for and that we are serving, and not talking for the elitists that we are trying to be.
So here's some of the words that the Washington Post points to in terms of words that the Democrats should probably ditch. Oligarchs being one of them, food insecurity another, equity, intersectionality. People say I'm intersectional. I'm not quite sure what that means. Latinx, which even Latinas and Latinos hate, and gender fluid.
Yeah, I'm reminded of that Mean Girls line, stop trying to make fetch happen, stop trying to make that garbage happen. I don't even know what it means. But look, there is a brain rot going on in the Democratic Party, and it was sort of highlighted by that first article at AOC, and Bernie thinks they need to double down on it. And not move away from it. And let's be honest with it. Half of these words were created by predominantly white people at liberal arts universities across the country. They don't speak to the normal people. And that might play well at cocktail parties on Martha's Vineyard. It doesn't play really well in the real world. But it's brought to you by the same intelligentsia that told us that Tim Walz could appeal to men the same way that Donald Trump from Jamaica, Queens could. It doesn't meet reality, and not to channel Rick Pitino, but Barack Obama isn't walking through that door anytime soon. Bill Clinton isn't walking through that door anytime soon. If they are, they're termed out. But they had more latitude to work with politically, and they spoke in a way that real people agreed with.
And people aren't dumb. Voters aren't dumb. They understand that not everyone is at the same, have the same jobs that they have, or in the same situation that they have, that politicians are not the same. But they want you to relate to them. They don't need you to be them. They just want you to talk to them like they're normal.
Yeah, I mean, for example, Donald Trump is never going to be a welder, but he knows how to talk to a welder.
Exactly.
Absolutely knows how to do that. Rahm Emanuel had a rather scathing assessment of the Democratic Party. Listen to what he said.
It's toxic. I don't think you have to caveat or put a disclaimer on it. And I think the way I would see it is there's two words that define the Democratic Party for the public: weak and woke.
Megan, would you agree with him?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily going to subscribe that we're weak. I think we're in a rebuilding phase. So I wouldn't say that we're weak. I think I think that we're a little toxic. I think we've lost our way, and I think we need to start being able to communicate to the people who we were making policies for all along, and the moderate people, the working class Democrats. We've lost that. We've lost the ability to do that somewhere along the line. Kind of what you're saying. It's like we want to sound smart for ourselves in our D.C. bubble, but we forgot that the people who are actually voting for us don't live in our same D.C. bubble.
So now the Democratic Party is apparently spending $20 million to try to learn how to talk to men that it lost en masse. Back in November, the New York Times says it's codenamed SAM, short for Speaking with American Men, a strategic plan, and promises investment to, quote, study the syntax, language, and content that gains attention and virality in these spaces. It recommends buying advertisements in video games. among other things. I can save the Democratic Party $20 million. Stop talking down to men. Stop accusing them of toxic masculinity, and stop demeaning them because they don't think exactly the same way that you do.
Reading that makes me want to crawl out of my skin. It's so cringe. And look, I think it's pretty easy to understand that the rise of people like Tim Dillon, who, by the way, is not a traditional conservative. He's a gay man who was a liberal for a long time, or Joe Rogan, who was a liberal before, Barstool Sports, and this demonization of Dave Portnoy and stuff. And it's like, you're missing the point. We've made humor toxic. We've made male humor toxic. And the candidates the Democrats are picking, it's really hard to imagine them going and having normal, fun, off-the-cuff conversations. That's why I give credit to people like Gavin Newsom for going into unfriendly territories, and the other Democratic politicians trying to do that. Republicans have just found out this is our lane, let's step on it, and Trump and Vance did it very well.
And a member of our team, who shall go unnamed, who's an avid gamer, said, really want to tick people off? You game? Put an ad in my video game.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks, folks. Great conversation today.
And the former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, joins us now. Thank you so much for being here with us on this Wednesday. Here's a headline from The Hill. No repeat of Biden. A medical panel must oversee president's annual physicals. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think you've got a doctor that lays out the information. And the one thing I see of this President Trump, he's pretty open about his health care. But my concern, especially on that last report, is I would go deeper, because I believe these Democratic leaders knew of this, because I spoke out and I was attacked. They were in the same meetings that I was in, that you watched President Biden not being there. And they not only were silent, they told the public something totally different. And then when you look even further, especially with this new book, like a Joe Scarborough, he openly would attack me and try to disname my ability to say what happened inside these meetings and say, President Biden was stronger and smarter than he's ever been. Was this a work of people together trying to mislead the American public? I think we've got to look much deeper and much further. And then with that information, what do we need to come out with our presidents? I'd like to know what the health is of every president.
Okay, I mean, you've been on the Hill. You know how this works. I wonder what information you get from it in the end. I wonder what it leads to in the end. I'm not quite sure what that answer is, depending on whether or not you get these interviews or whether or not they take a pass. On the flip side, let's talk about today. All right, here we go. Political Playbook saying Trump's media availability since Inauguration Day. This is astounding, okay? I mean, I don't think any president's ever done it this way. 111 out of 138 days gives him an 80% hit rate. That's pretty big accessibility.
I think that's probably the biggest around the world. But it's not just, you're saying out of 111 days out of 138, but there's times of those 111 days that he's open for question for hours and taking whatever anybody asks him. And it'd be earlier in the morning, later in the afternoon, then later in the day. This is probably the most transparent presidency we have ever seen. Plus, it's also he's transforming, but he's letting the American public and the world know at the exact same time.
Here's another thing which I've been wanting to ask you about. So the Democrats are throwing $20 million at an effort to basically reshape their messaging because they want to figure out how to talk to men. And here's a little sampling of Democrats using some left-wing buzzwords.
Power, greed, and corruption is taking over this country like never before. Oligarchy.
Thanks to Donald Trump, we now know what oligarchy is about.
We have a path forward, but we need generational change. Look.
Building coalitions and building community.
Our movement for justice and peace and equity.
And it's not working. Here's from the Washington Post. Democrat troubles revive debate over the buzzwords from intersectionality to equity. Many say jargon is alienating key voters, but progressives say inclusive language is vital. How are they going to work this out?
The way they're going to work this out, and I don't want to give the Democrats, tell them how to solve their problem, but they really need is let new people run. I mean, you're dealing with a Schumer, Hakeem, a Nancy Pelosi. I would grab new people. Don't let Washington pick them. Go out in the community and let those actually run. The one thing the Democratic Party has done as well is they don't allow Democrats to run. They want to pick before they even have a primary. They push people out. Have an open primary, let open ideas happen, and the Democratic Party as a whole will decide. And at the end of the day, it will be a much different candidate. If I was a Democrat candidate running for office, I'd run against Democrats today and against their leadership, and I think you'd be very successful.
All right, we'll see how that goes. Kevin, nice to see you, sir. Back in Washington, D.C. You enjoy that tour there in the nation's capital.
And the rain, it sounded like where Jackie was sitting.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jesse Waters, along with Rosanna Scotto, Jessica Tarlov, Dana Perino, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. Six months after Kamala got steamrolled and banished to Australia for speaking gigs, the Democratic Party just took another smack from the ugly stick of unpopularity. According to the latest poll, Republicans have a 10-point advantage on net favorability. But have no fear, libs. Mayor Pete thinks ditching the hoity-toity talk will help Democrats win back their spot at the cool kids table.
If I hear one more time, like a well-off liberal doctor or lawyer saying, that quote unquote, these folks are voting against their economic interests. I just wonder whether they ever contemplated the fact that somebody could turn around and say, so are you. There's a condescension that is imputed to Democrats that I think we really need to deal with.
But Little Debbie thinks the voters have got it all wrong about the Democrats.
Democrats are typically tagged as tortoises, slugs, or sloths, slow, plodding, passive. And then a little bit later, there was a respondee who said the Democrats are like a deer in headlights. How is it that you think that the Democratic Party has earned these descriptions?
John, I'm not focused on the animals that some New York Times reporter compares the political parties to. My constituents are human beings. I'm focused on the humans I represent, not, animal comparison.
And now Politico is proposing a bizarre shadow cabinet of Democrats to challenge the Trump administration, featuring such gems as alleged fraudster Tish James as Attorney General, Jon Stewart as VA Secretary, Giselle Fetterman, the wife of Big John, would be DHS Secretary, Bill Nye, the science guy, is EPA head, and comedian Nikki Glaser for the Small Business Administration. This is an interesting idea, a shadow cabinet, Dana.
I think it's ridiculous. But they are grasping at straws, okay? And they're circling the drain. There's lots of analogies that we could use for this. I joked with Jessica, I haven't seen her in a week, that I leave and then I come back and it's the same topic. And when Hammer asked me this morning, how long does this news cycle last? I said, I think it's for a long time. I don't see anything really getting it off of the front page because, one, they're not dealing with it directly, and two, there's just so much more. In fact, Fox News Digital just has a piece up today about a lot of the executive orders and how many of them were signed by Autopen. And these were huge sweeping deals. And we have, not testimony, but we have on the record comments from Speaker Johnson. Remember when he went and had a meeting with Biden and he says, why did you sign the executive order to ban LNG? And he says, I never did that. It's like, yes, you did. Like, well, it was just a study. Oh, guess what? Well, the study that goes to EPA all gets signed off. And Biden didn't know anything about it, and he wouldn't have done that if he knew. That, to me, is just the tip of the iceberg. So a lot more to come. And also you have the fact that there's a split in the Democratic Party that's very interesting. You have someone like Rahm Emanuel who's saying we have to go back to the center. That's probably true if they want to win, but that's not where the base is. The base is so much farther to the left. 2 weeks ago, AOC was seen as the person who's the number one choice for Democrats, the most exciting person in the Democratic Party, the one that people are looking to. Last week, she called for ending ICE. Right. The policies that she has are much further to the left than someone like Rahm Emanuel wants to go. So they need like a giant etch and sketch to shake all around to see if they can get rid of the policy positions they've had since 2016, 15, 16, 17. And I just don't see this ending for quite a while.
Jessica, some may say this will go on forever.
Are those people our producers?
That person is me. But when Dana brings up the Autopen, that means it's a legit scandal. It's not a conspiracy theory.
By this table standards, yes, I take Dana the most seriously, for sure. Listen, I feel like we are kind of halfway through the original sin cycle. There are a couple more books to come, and every time that one comes out, it's going to be rough. There are going to be details, there are going to be new names of people who should have said something but didn't say something, and I'll have a bad week, but I'm in it for the long haul, and I'm committed. And I'm also committed to the truth, Jesse. And the truth is that the Democrats are very unpopular, but so is a lot of what Donald Trump is doing. So in polling, Marquette, Fox News, all the goodies, he's down 16 on the economy, down 14 on foreign policy, 26 on handling tariffs, and 32 on cost of living. And this reconciliation bill that they're trying to pass through the Senate right now has opposition from more senators than they can handle. So you've got the Josh Hawleys of the world, who's miraculously concerned about throwing people off Medicaid. Rick Scott and Maria Bartiromo was raking him over the coals this morning about his views. Rand Paul, who has been talking about everything from how unconstitutional it is for Trump to be putting in these tariffs to how we're ballooning the deficit. Ron Johnson, Susan Collins, Jerry Moran. Those are a lot of senators that you've got to get on board. So if this is the big ticket item, right, this is the big marquee agenda piece that we're going to give tax cuts to the wealthy and we're going to take away food assistance and Medicaid, so we're hurting the poor to help the rich. That does not bode well for 2026. For the Republicans, or for 2028, when we're going to have a big, beautiful primary, and we will get a great candidate, and everyone will forget about the hoity-toity, and we shall be victorious.
It's funny, Jessica thinks she can sell that agenda, Greg, that Trump's this guy that hates the poor, and he's just out for Wall Street. It's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite.
No, the funny thing is, the reason why there's so much opposition to the bill is because it didn't go far enough. This is not about spending. I mean, you're saying this bill is awful because they're going to be cutting. We have to cut. We are heading toward a we're in a doom spiral.
But it balloons the deficit.
I'm saying that, but that's not why you're mad about it. You're mad that they might cut something, or they might cut taxes, and they might cut Medicaid. I'm saying is you should be mad that they're not cutting more. In terms of cutting Medicaid, let's be honest about the Medicaid stuff. This is about able-bodied young men and illegal immigrants. So push that aside and talk about the fact that you and I don't like the bill, but I don't like the bill because it's not going to stop the apocalypse. You don't like the bill because you want to press on the gas and go right off the cliff. Those are two different attitudes. We need to cut the deficit, not raise it. Can I talk about the shadow cabinet?
Please.
Okay. What is this story called? I know it's not summer. It's a
clickbait story?
It's a summer clickbait story. Yeah. No research, no reporting at all. As for a shadow cabinet, we already had one. It was 4 years under Biden. It was a cabal. It was responsible for the Autopens and the EOs. They had a shadow cabinet and kept Joe in a real cabinet while Kamala was at the liquor cabinet. Meanwhile, raises the question, who signed the pardons? Did Hunter Biden create and sign his own pardon? Because that is balls. But it's also illegal and it has to be stopped. If you look at this celebrity-filled cabinet, though, it basically is like a covers band of Trump. It's like, hey, he's on TV, he's famous, he's got a name, let's do what he does. But it's like trying to create a human by pasting together body parts. It doesn't make it alive. It's still dead, and you're still not doing the hard work, which is you have to change. You have Pete Buttigieg talking about the language, but the Dems are focused on the language because they realize the substance underneath it is what people hate. He talks about condescension. Okay, is there a condescending way, a non-condescending way to deny a border, to deny biology, to deny government corruption, crime, vagrancy, or spending into oblivion? Is there a humble conversational way that you can attract men when you're talking about women with penises, or men wanting to play women's sports, or cutting up your kids in gender experiments? Is there some kind of non-confrontational way that you can do that? Because I'm all ears. My point being is, it doesn't matter what language you use. Yeah. It's the ideas underneath it. The Dems obsess over language because the ideas are so putrid. A great idea requires 5th grade vocabulary. No, a bad idea requires a teacher's lounge vocabulary. A great idea could be monosyllabic, much like something that Jesse would understand.
Like build the wall.
Build the wall. Exactly. But if you're going to talk about boys playing and girls sports, man, you got to call that teacher's lounge right up and get the right words. The Dems are facing a huge cliff.
Yep.
It's like when you quit drugs or quit drinking. What is my life going to be like without identity politics, without the oppression filter? How do I look at issues when that thing isn't there? How do I wake up in the morning and not look through this prism? You got to do it.
I do.
I know.
All right, we'll just do it a little bit more, Jessica.
You just have vodka with breakfast.
Don't tell everyone about my regimen.
What is in here anyway? Everyone's been asking. I guess it's water. How's Pete's beard doing?
I think, Pete, we finally agree on the same things. There's 3 things that he said, really, we lost the trust of America right away as soon as the Biden administration took office. Closing down schools, he said, was a big problem. And then he also said that you have to, what did he say? Hold on, I got so lost up in the border. The border. Everybody knew what was going on in their neighborhood. They saw changes that they couldn't deal with. And then also, when they went to the grocery market and they saw that the eggs were too expensive, or they went to fill up the gas in their car, it was too expensive. The Democrats lost the country in those 3 issues right at the very beginning.
So again, another Democrat says we were right. Okay.
Remember when the chief of staff said that inflation was a high-class problem? I mean, you don't get much more condescending than that.
Condescension.
I hate that word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost as bad as tariff, right?
Yes, or Pinot Noir.
Or memoir.
Well, Democrat fury over this report that was based on a gathering of ideas from focus groups for what people think about the 2 parties. A New York Times piece titled 6 months later, Democrats are still searching for the path forward. And part of that article says this, quote, Republicans are seen as apex predators like lions, tigers, and sharks, beasts that take what they want when they want it. And Democrats are typically tagged as tortoises, slugs, or sloths, slow, plodding, passive, end of quote. Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz did not like that comparison.
I'm not focused on the animals that some New York Times reporter compares the political parties to. My constituents are human beings.
I will tell you, it was the voters who were making the comparison with animals, and this was a focus group. It wasn't the New York Times reporter coming up with these labels. This was a Democratic-led focus group to try to figure out perceptions of the parties.
Don, you said they were asked to compare the parties, so they were prompted to compare the parties to animals. That is ridiculous.
Well, while some Democrats have expressed anger about the unfavorable views of their party, others have pointed to some problems.
The way that you start to reach groups that you have lost favor with or that used to support the party but now don't, and you're losing traction with them, is partly a language thing, but really it's more of a substance thing.
Democrats do themselves a disservice by not engaging in some introspection here and some reflection on how it is that the party that sees itself as the party of working people came to be seen by so many working people as a party of elites.
Power panel now, Jeremy Hunt, former Army intel officer and chairman of Veterans on Duty, and Fred Hicks, Democratic strategist. Jeremy, I'm going to start with you. It's interesting. Look, I know these Democrats, former strategists, whomever, are being asked questions about this, but they have no loss for words talking about each other, themselves, all the things. I don't hear about the voters and what they learned from November 5th.
That's exactly right, Harris. I mean, the Democrats have become a party of the elite, as many of us know. A lot of the working class voters have flocked to the Republican Party, and a lot of the high net worth and college-educated voters are flocking over to the Democrat Party. And the thing about elites is that elites tend to think that all of their ideas are always better than other people's. They tend to think that if they could just be in charge and tell Americans what to do, that everything will work out fine. But the problem is that Americans obviously do not respond positively to that. And the issue is that the Democrats, if you listen to what they're saying, they think their issue is messaging, that we need to do better messaging. That is fake humility. It's not actually, they aren't willing to say that maybe it's our ideas, maybe it's the stances that we've taken. And what they want to say is that if we can just, educate these, these dumb working class people to our ideas and tell them why we know what we're talking about, then they'll vote for us. Like it's not going to work. And they actually, if they really wanted to get to the root of their problem, they'd actually do some real authentic introspection, not this fake humility about messaging.
Wow, the debate is on now, Fred. Fake humility. I mean, that's a phrase, and it captures a lot of what it seems like is going on your side of the aisle.
Well, I think it captures one person's perspective. And let me just say this before we really get into
well,
this.
And some of the people in that report who called you, what they call you, slow, plodding, and passive. I mean, does that describe you as a Democrat?
Well, so Harris and Jeremy, I think what we're losing sight of right now is why we're even having this discussion. And the reason why we're having this discussion is that Donald Trump just pushed the Congress to pass a bill that's going to add over $3 trillion in debt to the U.S. government. He is violating due process. He has been challenged in the courts, and the court's ruling against him left and right, including when he's trying to tell institutions of higher education how to manage their business. And so the whole reason why we're here is because Donald Trump is leaving what I've said before is a cavernous opening for Democrats and for Americans really to step forward. And here's the other thing. If this was a Democrat doing the things that Donald Trump are doing, then Republicans would be up in arms. And my philosophy is that if it's right when a Democrat does it, it's right when a Republican does it. You have plenty of time to be up in arms, but you're all focusing on, you're navel-gazing. You're focusing on yourselves. You're trying to fix it. The fake humility. Look, that's a catchphrase now that Jeremy has come up with, but you got to call it for what it is. And it is a huge
what it
is
you have a lot of complaints about Donald Trump, but you're not doing anything to go forward other than lawfare.
Lawfare. So what we're doing is we're looking at how to take advantage of this opening, and so we can fight for Americans. Again, unfortunately, with this big, beautiful bill that they passed last week.
Which Americans? The rich Americans? God love us all. You ignore the average people, income people. The
Americans who are relying upon Medicare, Medicaid, and basic services that are being cut in favor of the rich and the famous. That's who we're fighting for.
Jeremy, pick up, and then we'll move forward.
Yeah, look, I mean, the whole issue there is that there's a total reluctance to actually look and say, what are the substantive policy positions that we've taken and why aren't they working? The problem with Democrats is that they don't believe that Americans, I don't know if they don't think Americans are smart enough to actually care about the issues, but a lot of Americans do. And now with social media and the availability of information, we actually can get the facts and get an understanding of what's really going on. We don't have to go through legacy media anymore. We don't have to rely on the Democrat Party talking points. And once that whole veneer has started to fall, now Democrats are being exposed for what they are, and that's a party of out-of-touch elites.
All right, let's get to this way. Republicans are mocking Democrats now over a proposed plan to better communicate with male voters, and it could cost $20 million at least. According to a New York Times report, quote, the Speaking with American Men plan promises to invest in syntax and language to connect with men. It also recommends advertising in video games and avoiding a moralizing tone. Congresswoman Lisa McClain, chairwoman of the conference committee, says this about that. The Democrats are getting ready to light $20 million on fire to study their unpopularity, exclamation point. Another Republican says the Democrats declared war on masculinity and a lost generation of young men instead of doing an introspection as to what they did wrong. They're going to invest $20 million studying male syntax to try to better communicate their radical message, end quote. And here's conservative activist Charlie Kirk.
If they think that's what it's actually going to take to win back young men, maybe you need a message and a messenger that they can relate to. The Democrats have had a moralizing, almost scolding tone to them that if you do not adhere to our orthodoxy, you are a non-believer and you are not allowed in our ranks. And because of that, men of America have been sick and tired of being told what to do from a political party that hates them.
Fred.
So I appreciate the fact that the Democratic Party understands that it has a problem based on the poll results and the election results from last year. The reality is that Democrats did lose a large portion of vote share, really across many segments, including with men. And so this is something that needs to be addressed. And I think that's a really good thing to acknowledge that there's an issue there and that we need to work on that. That being said, again, as I just mentioned, I think there are a number of areas where we talk about the message or the substantive parts of policy, that there's something there. As a man, I don't want to leave my kids or my grandkids or my nieces and nephews when I have them and all of that with a $3 trillion increase in the deficit. That's not what we voted for. The hypocrisy of this version of the Republican Party versus what they ran on in 2024 versus what they're doing in 2025 is galling. And as men, we're going to be left holding the bag with that.
Wow.
And I think Democrats are wise to look at how to handle that.
Now, I don't think you're paying attention to what the economy is actually. You do know inflation's been going down. I mean, I don't know how much attention you're. It was at 9%.
It was feeling down.
It couldn't go any higher without people ending up in the streets. I mean, come on. We can't argue about the Biden era inflation without taking a look at just how historic it really was. Jeremy, last word.
The $3 trillion.
Yeah, look, if Democrats really wanted to make a difference and make a change, they wouldn't spend $20 million on studies or more polling. It's all about just listening to people. Just listen to Americans. Invest in flight tickets. It's in all these Democrat staffers and media personalities on the left and all these people who are, have influence on the left. Fly out to real America, get outside the D.C. Beltway, and actually listen to people. Not for a photo op, not for a press conference or a press release. Just listen to Americans, listen to men, see what are the issues that we actually care about, and then maybe they'll see some results. But I don't know if that's what they're going to do based off of Fred's talking points. I don't know if they're in the right position to even think that way.
Well, look, listen to people and then devise really good policy. I mean, Fred's got it. It's just not happening at all. All right, gentlemen, thank you.
Politico writer rolling out his own Democrat shadow cabinet to respond to the Trump administration and fix the party's problem, to speak plainly to Americans. So who's included? They're on your screen right now. Names like entrepreneur Mark Cuban, TV host Bill Nye, and comedians Jon Stewart and Nikki Glaser. Fox News contributor and senior writer for the Washington Examiner, Joe Concha, not on that list, but he does join me now. Joe, what the heck's the point of this fever dream?
Oh, Todd, I know it's only May, but this is by far the dumbest piece you will read all year. I mean, for starters, we already had a shadow cabinet running this country. That was called the Biden administration when we had a president whose brain turned applesauce, and apparently all these other people were running the Autopen. And that was just so inept, but perhaps Bill Nye, the science guy, Nikki Glaser, Letitia James, who may be going to jail, those could be considered possible upgrades compared to what we just saw. But this is all media outlets like Politico have at this point, because Donald Trump right now is soaring in the polls. Rasmussen, Todd, even shows that more people believe that the country is on the right track than the wrong track. That has never happened in the history of Rasmussen polling. More and more polls show Trump exceeding 50% approval. So, when you look at Biden's shadow government or this proposed shadow government, I don't understand the point, because the current government right now, according to the people, is doing quite well on the economy, on the border, and all the issues that people care about most.
But, Joe, I think you actually hit on something really interesting. And it's this notion that actually came out in the original Sin book that we've been covering over the course of the last 3 weeks. There is a significant segment in the Democrat Party that said it's okay that Joe Biden was not in control, because as long as there was a cabinet there keeping Trump out and going to do the opposite of whatever Trump would do, that's okay. Democracy be damned. And so I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, is the point of this article. They don't care necessarily about democracy. All they care about is making sure that Trump's policies and Trump himself cannot get a foothold. Your thoughts?
Oh, no, you're right about that, Todd, because, again, cabinet members are not elected by the people, right? These are people that are installed, just like Kamala Harris. They tried to install her. Hillary Clinton, in essence, was installed over Bernie Sanders by the DNC when they obviously backed Clinton. So, yeah, if the people aren't voting for those in power, that's not democracy. That's the Politburo, and we don't want the Soviet Union here in the United States. That I do know.
Meantime, comedian Bill Maher calling out the left for supporting Hamas. Listen to this.
That's what's so ironic about liberals being so supportive of Hamas, is because you're liberals. All the protesters who are protesting in Gaza against Hamas, they've all been killed. I mean, do I have to say anything more than just if it was just that issue, how women are treated? Are you kidding me?
I mean, he's got a point, Joe.
He has a lot of good points lately, I think. It's a reminder once again, Todd, that Bill Maher is increasingly the voice of reason for those on the left. And supporting Hamas, that's like supporting al-Qaeda. That's like supporting cancer. I mean, this anti-Israel, anti-Semitic sentiment truly is a cancer within the Democratic Party, and it doesn't seem like it's going away anytime soon. And this is going to hurt the Democratic Party like it did on November 5th, 2024. It will again in 2026 during the midterms and during the 2028 election, when we continue to see images like this, Hamas flags, the killing of that poor couple down in Washington, D.C. last week at the Israeli embassy, and then Representative Ilhan Omar doesn't even condemn it for a very long time. I'm sorry. This is something that's a real problem, and I don't understand where it comes from because there's no logic in it, but here we are.
There are some, though, Joe, in the Democratic Party who want to go back to the old ways, where you didn't support a terror organization. One of them, former Chicago mayor and Democrat operative Rahm Emanuel. He's considering a run for president in 2028. Boy, it really does seem like he's going to throw his hat in the ring. And he called out his own party during a Wall Street Journal interview. He said, is trying to accomplish something that seems pretty far-fetched, even for him, push his Democrat Party, rooted in the identity politics of the left, to the center. He calls the party's brand toxic and weak and woke, a nod to culture war issues he thinks Democrats have become too often fixated on that President Trump has successfully used against them. Rahm Emanuel once said, quote, "Never let a crisis go to waste." Is this his moment to take advantage of this abject crisis in his own party?
I don't think it is, Todd, because I remember another mayor of New York City ran for the Democratic nomination in 2020, and that was Michael Bloomberg. And Bloomberg was an excellent mayor of New York. He continued Rudy Giuliani's crime initiatives. The city was clean. It was safe. It was run like a business. And he had 3 terms as mayor here. Then he runs for president in 2020, Bloomberg does, and was eviscerated by the left and was out quite quickly despite spending a lot of money. And by the way, Rahm Emanuel, he left as mayor of Chicago with an approval rating of 18%. His record in Chicago is what it is. And if he's the answer, then this party is in serious trouble from a leadership perspective, because when you're polling at 18% in a blue city like Chicago, that record's going to be thrown back in your face in a hurry by those in the center, and those on the left are not going to embrace a Rahm Emanuel, who will be seen as too moderate and too sane for the AOCs of the world, who probably also will be seeking the Democratic nomination, Todd.
I think you nailed the point about his time as mayor. It did not go as well as Michael Bloomberg or as well as basically almost any other mayor in America. He also nailed another point. During a primary, you have a tendency to go to the extremes in order to win the nomination. If he's saying he's going to want to go to center, you raise a great point. It could be AOC that takes the mantle because the Democrat Party that's voting in a primary wants the left. They want the left. They don't want the center. Rahm Emanuel pushing to the center. Joe Concha pushing the conversation forward. We appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Todd, good to see you at the Jersey Shore this weekend. That was fun.
Concha and I were hanging. Love it, brother.
Yes.
Joining me now is former federal prosecutor Brett Tolman. Brett, thanks for being with us here today. When it comes to the media, the accountability that is required is simply public awareness so that we can continue to tune out those who lie, that they have burned their own reputations at the stake of perhaps this anti-Trump bias, and their ratings have in turn suffered. But what about those, Brett, around Joe Biden that perpetuated this deception? Is there any potential real accountability?
Well, Will, there is accountability ahead for them. It is no coincidence that you are starting to hear stories and small leaks of people and individuals that may have been involved, utilization of the Autopen that may have been inappropriate. And keep in mind, if an individual, for example, that works in a small government office were to embezzle funds or were to manipulate or develop some scheme to, get a benefit that they weren't entitled to, we'd have no problem investigating that and then bringing them to justice. Here, you know, the most powerful office in our country may have been manipulated by individuals that were seeking to benefit themselves or others, it absolutely should be investigated rigorously, and accountability should be the only inevitable conclusion to that investigation.
You bring up embezzlement. So if there is accountability in this situation, Brett, what charges? What could be brought?
Well, you know, there are probably a dozen different statutes that are aimed specifically at individuals who are willing to abuse their power in government, who are willing to do things that are unethical and illegal in order to gain a personal benefit or a benefit for someone else. Not to mention that if fraud is occurring, where you're actually using the power that you don't have through some scheme to enable a benefit for yourself or others, then you have fraud statutes that may come into play. We need to know who was doing what level of manipulation, how they used the authority of President Biden while he was incapacitated, and then did it inure to the benefit of those individuals or individuals that surround them.
Okay, tell me more about that. You brought up fraud, and you said there's a dozen other charges, but you consistently said that inured a benefit to those individuals that would be subjected to charges. So in embezzlement, that's clear. It's a financial benefit to those. In this situation, fraud, what would you have to show would be a requisite benefit for, say, a chief of staff or maybe even a spouse or whoever it may be? What kind of benefit?
Well, there are many benefits that are not necessarily just financial. We do know, though, financial benefits may have been extended. Money may have been authorized to be spent that wouldn't have otherwise without the ability to use the Autopen and manipulate the president. But there are many other benefits. You and I both saw and watched in dismay as individuals received pardons, preemptive pardons that many argue are unconstitutional. So there are benefits that may have been given and extended through the power
Brett,
of the president.
Do the pardons threaten to cut the conversation you and I are having off at the beginning? Like there's nowhere else to go. It's a stillbirth when it comes to potential accountability?
Yeah, it may with some. Those that may have received the preemptive pardons, what is the scope of the pardon and is it valid? The Supreme Court may ultimately be deciding whether or not a president can extend his clemency power when there hasn't been charges brought. And that's a question that many argue and disagree with. So, Will, your point's a very good one. We may see individuals that avoid accountability if they were involved in that manipulation based on those preemptive pardons.
Okay, so let me just say, as we wind this up, see if I fully understand. So first you figure out who is responsible for the deception, for maintaining this fraud on the American public. Then you bring charges, whether or not they may be fraud, a bunch of different potential charges. You said a dozen where they experienced benefits to themselves by deceiving the American people. Third, you bring those charges, you get a conviction, but then you have to deal with the pardon, which makes its way up to the Supreme Court to see if that has been already wiped away, slate wiped clean. They get away with it, no accountability. Is that a flow chart?
I think it is a flow chart. The one caveat being the Supreme Court may very well rule that the president doesn't have the power to extend a pardon where no crime has been alleged.
All right. Fascinating conversation with real substance to it. Brett Tolman, thanks so much for bringing that to us today.
Thanks, Will.
A lot of these Democrats seem to think that Trump's style is going to sink him. Where have they been?
The Dems in the media spent his first term with their hair on fire over his tweets. 4 years later, their solution is they let their hair grow out again and set it on fire again. And it's not working. Trump gives them so much. And all they do is cry. No, no, no. Make it stop. Make the mean man stop. Look, you had 4 years of hibernation. You didn't have to do squat. You get nothing from us. It's funny now you have to do your job and nobody cares. It's like there's nothing the media can do. Nobody trusts you. You're like you're like the sound of an air conditioner in a room. We just got used to the hum. We don't even know you're there. You know what the funny thing is? The Dems don't understand Trumpers. That Trumpers understand that Trump is a package deal. Mm-hmm. We know what we're getting with Trump, and it's an all-inclusive package. And maybe there's some things you could do without it, but you can't do Trump a la carte. There's just no way to do it. I used to think that he won in spite of Trump's tweets. I think now he won because of it, because the outbursts and his kind of tone and attitude tells you everything's in working order. It's like, when you have a Shelby Mustang in the driveway, you hear the engine, it's loud, it's scary, but it's working. Meanwhile, the Democrats' car is in the garage, it's up on blocks, and it's sputtering every time you turn the key.
Well, and after Biden, radical transparency, Jesse, might be exactly what the doctor ordered for the country. And maybe for the Democrats.
Well, first of all, Greg just called Jessica an air conditioner. And it was probably the nicest thing he ever said about her.
A white noise machine.
Hey, if you don't have air conditioning, though, you would be upset.
Yeah, but you know who wanted to ban it? Democrats.
That's right.
Not true.
And
have your
gas,
dishwasher,
grills,
have your air conditioner.
Jessica. And that's why my hair looks flat today, because it's a slow flow shower. Not anymore. So Trump was like a presidential shock jock. And for 10 years, they're still shocked. They're not shocked anymore. Everyone got over it right away. It was only shocking because he was saying things that no other politician had ever said. Everybody in their private lives said the same things and thought the same things. And that's why he loved them, because he said the same things we all felt in our heart. Now, if you're pretending to still be shocked now, while at the same time trying to act like him, trying to say, we need our own Trump, and Adam Schiff sounds like this Democrat Dirty Harry, over my dead body, get the F out of here, and how do we talk like men? And then every time a real man talks, they're like, oh my God, I can't hear this. You guys got to pick a lane and figure it out. Now, the Joe Biden stuff. I'm just remembering these conversations I had with the air conditioner. And we would say stuff like, where's he been for 6 days? And you'd be like, well, he just had a cabinet meeting. We'd be like, but it was staged, Jessica. Oh, well, he just did a sit-down interview. Yeah, it was with Dylan. These are the kind of things we were going through. And Tapper saw it. Tapper saw him almost fall asleep with Al Roker. He almost, what was that? An interview that he skipped for the Super Bowl, which is a layup. So now they're acting like, oh, we didn't see anything. He skipped the Super Bowl interview. That's when you knew. That's when you knew it was all over. They were in on hiding Biden.
And he slept with Al Roker?
He slept with Al Roker.
My goodness.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Wow, that's intense. Rosanna, you know this. You work in media. We live in a content world. And you can make content. You can react to content. But you can't stand still. But the Democrats have been standing still and just hoping that Trump falls. They hoped that he was going to go to jail. They hoped that he was going to lose the election. They just hope that he will go away. And that now they're hoping that people will just get tired of him because of his style. And meanwhile, the Democrats' popularity continues to go down while Trump's is, it's down relative to where it was, Jessica, I agree. But it's still better than where they are.
Well, the Democrats used to have their finger on the pulse. But let's face it, 6 months later after the election, and they're still trying to figure out what went wrong. So they go to this highfalutin hotel. And they sit down and they try to figure out what they did wrong, what their new message is. And then everybody finds out they went to, a very expensive hotel. And are they tone deaf? Are they not listening to the American people? The Democrats were a party of lunch pail voters, labor unions. They had their finger on the pulse, championing labor, fair wages, social issues. They've gone so far from their original cause. I think that they're looking to find a messenger. And right now, I don't think they have one in mind. It seems every few weeks
let me just open it
they have somebody new.
Let me open up to Jessica then. Do you think they have a messenger now that is effective?
Yeah, I do. Who? I think Bernie Sanders and AOC are very effective messengers.
Really? So do we.
But they're
but that's not about who's going to lead the ticket.
With what a Rahm Emanuel is saying that
the
party
and
needs.
I enjoy listening to Rahm Emanuel and hearing from him, and I'm glad that he's all over the media circuit as well. But there is something compelling in the energy that AOC and Bernie are bringing. And you see that in the reaction of people going to these rallies who say, this isn't even my politics. You think that Iowa is full of, Idaho is full of people. So they like the
energy, but the policies are terrible?
It's not about policy right now. The election is 18 months away for the midterms even, not even the presidency. People are desperate to see the Democrats have a pulse. They like Chris Murphy right now, who has a completely moderate set of policies. If you watch him, he's creating content constantly. He's right now walking across the state of Connecticut, talking to voters.
He has a moderate
Who's Chris Murphy?
Chris Murphy, the
He's terrible.
senator
Is
from
that a joke?
Connecticut.
I mean, I know, but I mean,
the one who said
seriously.
that he didn't have daughters, so he couldn't talk about transgender
Yeah, he's a coward.
sports.
He grew a beard too.
Yep. What's
He's not,
that about?
he's
no,
not a
can I
man.
say-
He's not a man.
I think that's biologically incorrect.
No. I think
okay.
he's trans.
Stop it.
I don't know. Trans men are men or trans men
We're
women.
not-
Sure.
Well, we'll figure it out in the C block, which is about trans women.
What does C stand for?
What?
It
There
stands
is-
for up next.
No. There is an important distinction to be drawn between being accessible and being good or delivering truth or actually saying what's going on in the world. And now I'm all fuddled up in my head. But
He told Bibi Netanyahu to
Bibi.
cut it out.
We don't call him Bibi.
I always get that name wrong.
Well, don't. He's
Bibi.
important. There is. Donald Trump does this thing. Not only like today, he says, we got 5.1 trillion in the Middle East. It was 1.5 trillion like a week ago. But most importantly, he sits down for these interviews, and I think Biden should have been more accessible. Maybe we would have had a competitive primary if he had been more accessible. But he does these interviews, and then he says, I don't know or I'm not sure. Like Kristen Welker asked him, do you need to uphold the Constitution? I don't know. Ask a lawyer. Are you sending migrants to Libya? I don't know. Ask Homeland Security. You just announced a new nominee for Surgeon General who didn't graduate from med school. Why? Bobby likes her. I don't know her. You have the power to bring back Abrego Garcia. I don't make that decision. Lawyers do.
You were arguing on behalf of him right now.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that is what the criticism is of him. He may be in front of you, but that doesn't mean that he's not spewing utter BS.
But you know what? I got to say.
What do you have to say?
I have to say that the hardest thing that you're dealing with, and I think a lot, is that nobody respects the media enough to give them an answer after what they did to the American people for 4+ years. They covered up. So it's like
then let's stop talking about Jake Tapper.
No, I've never stopped talking. How dare you?
Give me a break.
All right.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.